What happened in northern Israel over the last 48 hours is not a surprise to me. It is not a surprise to anyone who has been paying genuine, honest attention to the trajectory of this conflict. In a single devastating engagement, Iran and its allies unleashed more than 450 missiles, including hundreds of advanced Kheibar Shekan ballistic missiles. The result? 9 elite IDF units, including multiple brigade formations under Northern Command, were effectively massacred as functioning combat organizations. IDF Northern Command, the operational brain coordinating Israel's entire northern defense architecture, now lies in rubble. Command nodes obliterated, communications severed, logistics chains shattered. 9 units that once formed the backbone of Israel's northern posture are no longer coherent fighting forces. Israel is in hysteria, and tonight, the bill that Washington and Tel Aviv have spent 15 years trying to avoid has finally come due. This was no random barrage, it was a precision saturation strike meticulously planned and executed against the most critical nodes in Israel's northern military structure. The volume, the accuracy, and the sustained destructive effect have no precedent in the history of this conflict. While Israeli and American officials will scramble to downplay the damage in the coming days, the physical evidence on the ground tells a different story, one of systematic, cascading collapse. Before we go any deeper, and we are going to go considerably deeper if you want unfiltered, serious analysis that cuts through the institutional spin coming out of Washington and Tel Aviv, do 2 things right now. Hit the like button on this video and subscribe to Lawrence Wilkerson Daily with notifications turned on. Drop a comment below and let me know how long do you think Israel can sustain this without direct American intervention? Your engagement helps us reach more people who need to hear the truth. Now, stay with me, because in this analysis, I will answer the questions that emergency sessions in Tel Aviv and Washington are desperately trying to avoid in public. How did more than 450 missiles, many of them advanced Kheibar Shekan, simultaneously overwhelm and penetrate Israel's vaunted multi-layered missile defense system after decades of massive American investment? What does the destruction of 9 elite IDF units in a single engagement window reveal about the real state of Israeli ground force command and control? Why is Israel already signaling panic and seeking de-escalation rather than retaliation? What is Washington actually capable of doing, and more importantly, what is it willing to do? And finally, what are Russia, China, and the broader axis of resistance learning from this operation? And how does this single night accelerate the shift toward a genuinely multipolar world? By the end of this breakdown, you will understand not just what occurred in northern Israel, but why this moment represents the operational confirmation of strategic realities that a small number of serious analysts have been warning about for 15 years. The institutional narrative is already working overtime to contain this story. We are not going to let that happen. Let's begin. Let us now examine exactly what unfolded on the ground in northern Israel during that decisive engagement. More than 450 missiles were launched in a coordinated salvo, with a significant portion consisting of advanced Kheibar Shekan medium-range ballistic missiles. These solid-fuel weapons, each carrying a 550-kilogram warhead and capable of ranges exceeding 1,400 kilometers, struck with a speed and precision that overwhelmed defensive responses. The primary target package was not random population centers, but the operational heart of Israel's northern defense, IDF Northern Command headquarters and the command infrastructure of 9 elite units under its authority. IDF Northern Command, based in the Galilee region, serves as the central nervous system for all operations along the Lebanese and Syrian borders. It coordinates ground forces, air support, logistics, and real-time intelligence across multiple divisions, including armored, infantry, and artillery brigades. When the missiles impacted, they systematically dismantled this architecture. Primary and backup command facilities were hit, communications relay stations went silent, and logistics hubs sustaining forward-deployed formations were severed. The result was not merely damage, it was the rapid disintegration of organizational coherence across 9 brigade-level formations. I must be precise with language here. When we say these 9 units were massacred as combat formations, we do not mean every soldier was killed or every vehicle destroyed. In military terms, a brigade ceases to exist as a fighting force when its command nodes are eliminated, its fire control systems are blinded, its resupply lines are cut, and its subordinate battalions lose the ability to coordinate or receive orders from higher headquarters. That is precisely what occurred. Soldiers and equipment remained, but they operated in a tactical vacuum, isolated, unable to synchronize maneuvers, and deprived of the intelligence and support that transform individual units into a cohesive army. The attack demonstrated sophisticated targeting intelligence accumulated over years. Iranian and Allied planners did not simply aim at a single headquarters building. They allocated missiles across a layered target set: the main Northern Command complex, redundant command posts, key communication relays, ammunition and fuel depots, and air defense coordination centers that would otherwise direct interceptors. This was a classic saturation operation combined with precision strikes. By flooding the engagement envelope with high-volume ballistic missiles arriving in compressed time windows, the attackers forced Israeli defenses to prioritize threats, while residual rounds, those that penetrated the intercept layers, delivered decisive effects on the most critical nodes. The engagement window was remarkably short. Within minutes, the cascading failures became evident. Brigade commanders lost contact with division headquarters. Artillery batteries could no longer receive fire missions. Forward observation posts operated without updated intelligence. What had been a tightly integrated defensive posture along the northern frontier collapsed into disconnected pockets of resistance. Israeli attempts at rapid reconstitution were hampered by the very destruction of the command and control backbone that such recovery depends upon. This was not an opportunistic strike born of chance. It reflected deep preparation, detailed mapping of Israeli order of battle, identification of fixed and semi-fixed infrastructure, and careful calculation of the missile volume required to exceed defensive throughput capacity. The operational reality on the ground in northern Israel confirms a level of planning and execution that has fundamentally altered the military balance along that front. What we witnessed was not degradation, it was the temporary but profound neutralization of Israel's elite northern formations as an effective fighting echelon. This tactical success sets the stage for understanding the weapon that made it possible and the deeper strategic choices that enabled it. But first, the immediate human and operational cost is undeniable. 9 units that Israel relied upon to secure its northern border are, for the foreseeable future, combat ineffective. That single fact has already begun to reshape decision-making in Tel Aviv. Now let us turn to the weapon that delivered this unprecedented blow, the Kheibar Shekan medium-range ballistic missile. Developed by Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, this solid fuel system represents a generational leap in Tehran's offensive capabilities. Measuring 11.4 meters in length, 76 centimeters in diameter, and weighing approximately 6.3 tons at launch, the missile carries a 550-kilogram high-explosive warhead. Its 1,450-kilometer range allows launch positions deep inside Iranian territory, well beyond the effective reach of most Israeli counter-battery assets. What makes the Kheibar Shekan particularly dangerous is its design philosophy. Powered by a single-stage solid-fuel engine, it can be prepared and launched from mobile platforms in a fraction of the time required by older liquid fuel systems. Its composite materials reduce overall weight while maintaining structural integrity, enabling rapid deployment. Most critically, the missile features a maneuverable re-entry vehicle with a triconic warhead shape, allowing it to perform high-speed evasive maneuvers during the terminal phase at speeds approaching Mach 4 to 5. This capability directly challenges the predictive algorithms of Israel's Arrow and David Sling interceptors. Unlike many earlier Iranian missiles that relied heavily on satellite navigation, the Kheibar Shekan incorporates advanced inertial guidance with indigenous signal processing enhancements. This hybrid system grants it significant resistance to electronic warfare jamming and GPS spoofing. The warhead's explosive composition, reportedly far more powerful than conventional TNT equivalents, is optimized for hardened command bunkers and infrastructure targets rather than soft area effects. The broader significance lies in how this missile was created. Under decades of stringent Western sanctions that denied Iran access to advanced microelectronics and precision machinery, Iranian engineers achieved what many in Washington once dismissed as impossible. They leveraged domestic innovation, reverse-engineered foreign components when opportunities arose, and focused relentlessly on defeating American-supplied layered defenses. The result is a weapon engineered specifically to saturate and penetrate systems like Iron Dome at short range, David Sling at medium range, and Arrow at upper tier. In the recent engagement, the mathematics proved decisive. Each defensive battery possesses finite interceptor magazines, limited reload speeds, and constrained simultaneous engagement capacity. When hundreds of Kheibar Shekan missiles arrived in tightly spaced salvos, the Israeli air defense architecture reached its throughput ceiling. Enough missiles penetrated to deliver lethal effects on the intended command nodes. This was not luck or a lucky shot. It was the operational validation of a patient, disciplined Iranian program that treated missile defense not as an insurmountable barrier, but as a technical problem to be solved through volume, speed, maneuverability, and independence from vulnerable guidance links. The Kheibar Shekan has now demonstrated in combat that a sanctioned state can develop weapons capable of challenging the technological superiority long assumed by the United States and its allies. With the operational picture and the weapons capabilities now clear, the next question becomes unavoidable. How is Washington responding, and what are the real limits of American power in this crisis? Let us now examine Washington's response to this strategic shock. In the hours following the missile barrage, the United States moved with visible urgency. Emergency arms packages were accelerated, including additional interceptor missiles for Arrow and David's sling systems, precision-guided munitions, and enhanced intelligence sharing protocols. American officials publicly reaffirmed their ironclad commitment to Israel's security while quietly dispatching senior diplomats to urge restraint and explore ceasefire channels. Several U.S. Navy assets, including carrier strike groups already in the region, adjusted their positioning to provide a visible deterrent and potential air cover. Yet beneath these immediate actions lies a far more revealing picture of American limitations. The Pentagon possesses the technical capacity to conduct long-range strikes against Iranian missile production facilities, command centers, or storage sites. American air and naval forces could, in theory, deliver devastating blows. However, the willingness to exercise that capability is conspicuously absent. Senior decision-makers in Washington understand that direct kinetic action against Iran would trigger a cascade of consequences: closure or severe disruption of the Strait of Hormuz, coordinated attacks on U.S. bases across Iraq and Syria, heightened Hezbollah operations on Israel's northern border, and potential escalation involving Iranian proxies throughout the region. The political and economic costs, surging oil prices, global market instability, and the risk of a wider war appear to outweigh any perceived strategic benefit in the current calculus. This gap between capability and willingness defines the present moment. For years, American policy toward Iran has oscillated between periods of maximum pressure through sanctions and sporadic attempts at diplomatic engagement. Neither approach succeeded in halting Iran's military modernization. Sanctions imposed real economic pain but failed to alter Tehran's strategic behavior or slow its missile and drone programs. Diplomatic initiatives, meanwhile, never addressed the core security concerns driving Iran's investment in asymmetric capabilities. The result is a superpower that retains enormous military power on paper but finds its hands increasingly tied by the very deterrence architecture Iran has patiently constructed. Israel now finds itself in the uncomfortable position of depending on American support that is generous in materiel yet restrained in direct intervention. Emergency transfers of interceptors will help replenish depleted stocks, but they cannot restore the destroyed command infrastructure in the north overnight, nor can they alter the fundamental shift in the regional balance of power. Washington's strategy appears focused on damage control and crisis management rather than decisive resolution. This episode exposes a deeper geopolitical reality. American strategic freedom in the Middle East is narrower than public rhetoric suggests. The United States can still project power, but the threshold for using that power against a determined, well-armed adversary like Iran has risen significantly. The missiles that struck northern Israel were not aimed solely at IDF brigades, they were also a message to Washington about the true costs of escalation. As the dust settles and ceasefire talks intensify, the question hanging over the Biden administration, or whichever team occupies the White House, is whether America will continue managing decline in the region or finally confront the strategic recalibration this moment demands. While Washington scrambles to manage the crisis through limited arms transfers and diplomatic pressure, America's strategic competitors are watching this engagement with intense professional interest and calculating their next moves. Russia, China, and North Korea, key nodes in what some now call the axis of resistance, are drawing direct operational and geopolitical lessons from the successful neutralization of 9 elite IDF units by Iranian missiles. For Moscow, the strike represents a live-fire laboratory. Russian military analysts are closely studying how solid-fuel ballistic missiles with maneuverable re-entry vehicles defeated layered Western-supplied defenses. The saturation tactics, terminal phase evasion maneuvers, and targeting of command and control nodes provide valuable data for Russia's own hypersonic and ballistic programs. Lessons learned here will likely inform Russian planning for potential high-intensity scenarios in Eastern Europe, where NATO air defenses could face similar massed attacks. Beyond technology, Russia benefits indirectly. Higher oil prices triggered by regional instability provide Moscow with much-needed revenue, while the distraction weakens Western focus on Ukraine. Russian naval assets, including destroyers and intelligence-gathering ships, have reportedly increased activity in the Mediterranean and Indian Ocean, signaling readiness to exploit any power vacuum. Beijing's perspective is more geopolitical than purely military. Chinese strategists see confirmation that asymmetric capabilities can challenge technologically superior forces without direct confrontation. The episode strengthens China's narrative that American security guarantees have limits, encouraging Gulf states and other partners to diversify their alliances. Diplomatically, China is positioning itself as a potential mediator, leveraging its close economic ties with Iran and its role in the 2023 Saudi-Iran rapprochement. By offering economic incentives and stability frameworks that Washington struggles to match, Beijing aims to emerge as the indispensable power broker in the Middle East. This would further erode American influence while securing China's energy imports and Belt and Road interests. North Korea, though smaller in scale, views the event through the lens of its own missile development and survival strategy. Pyongyang has long cooperated with Iran on ballistic technology. The demonstrated effectiveness of mobile, solid fuel systems resistant to sanctions and electronic warfare validates North Korea's parallel investments. Observers in Pyongyang are noting how a sanctioned state can impose significant costs on a U.S. ally, reinforcing the regime's belief that credible deterrence through missile power can deter intervention. Collectively, these reactions highlight a deepening alignment. Russia provides technical expertise and diplomatic cover, China offers economic depth and diplomatic maneuvering, and North Korea contributes niche missile know-how. The result is a loose but increasingly effective network that amplifies Iran's reach while testing the boundaries of American power projection. Naval movements by Russian and Chinese forces in the region serve as quiet reminders that any direct U.S. escalation could face multifaceted pushback. This is not mere opportunism, it is the practical manifestation of a shifting global order, where the demonstration of Iranian capability accelerates the transition toward multipolarity. The destruction of those 9 IDF brigades was felt not only in Tel Aviv but in war rooms from Moscow to Beijing to Pyongyang. Each capital is updating its assessments, refining its strategies, and preparing for a world in which American dominance is no longer assumed. Beyond missiles, command structures, and great power calculations lies a deeper, often underestimated dimension of this conflict, the factor of will and national spirit. In military affairs, technology and numbers matter, but they rarely decide outcomes when one side possesses a fundamentally stronger sense of purpose and willingness to endure hardship. On the Iranian and Hezbollah side, the fighting spirit is rooted in a powerful narrative of resistance and survival. For decades, Iran has framed its struggle as a defense of sovereignty against what it calls imperialist domination. This narrative is not abstract propaganda, it is deeply embedded in the national psyche, reinforced through education, religious institutions, and decades of sanctions that have hardened rather than broken the population. Iranian soldiers, missile crews, and commanders operate with the conviction that they are defending their homeland and their dignity against a technologically superior but externally dependent adversary. This internal cohesion allows Tehran to absorb economic punishment, absorb casualties, and maintain long-term strategic patience that Western planners have repeatedly underestimated. Hezbollah fighters in southern Lebanon add another layer. Many view the conflict not as a border dispute but as an existential battle against occupation and humiliation. Their willingness to operate in small, decentralized units under constant threat of Israeli air power stems from a deeply held belief that resistance itself is victory. This spirit has enabled them to maintain rocket and missile capabilities even after years of targeted assassinations and infrastructure strikes. When fighters believe their cause is just and their sacrifices meaningful, they display levels of resilience and improvisation that purely professional armies sometimes struggle to match. In contrast, Israel's position reveals the vulnerabilities of a force that, while highly professional and technologically advanced, increasingly relies on external patronage and superior firepower to compensate for limitations in depth and endurance. Israeli society has grown accustomed to rapid, decisive victories with minimal, prolonged sacrifice. When operations drag on or when elite units suffer sudden, humiliating losses as occurred with the 9 brigades in the north, public confidence can fracture quickly. The current hysteria in Israeli media and political circles reflects not just tactical setbacks but a deeper anxiety about whether the state can sustain a long war of attrition against an adversary that refuses to play by the old rules of quick technological dominance. The United States, as Israel's primary backer, faces its own crisis of will. American support remains generous in weapons and funding, yet Washington shows clear reluctance to commit its own forces directly. This hesitation stems from bitter lessons in Iraq and Afghanistan, where overwhelming military superiority failed to produce lasting strategic success against determined local resistance. The American public and political class increasingly question the wisdom of indefinite entanglement in Middle Eastern conflicts that drain resources and political capital with uncertain returns. History consistently shows that wars are won not only by the side with better weapons, but by the side whose people and leaders are prepared to bear greater costs for longer. Iran and its allies have demonstrated a willingness to endure sanctions, isolation, and targeted strikes for strategic gains measured in decades rather than election cycles. Israel and the United States, by comparison, operate under shorter time horizons and higher sensitivity to casualties and economic disruption. This asymmetry in will and spirit may ultimately prove more decisive than any single missile salvo. The events in northern Israel have exposed not just a gap in capabilities, but a profound difference in the moral and psychological stamina each side brings to the battlefield. As ceasefire negotiations intensify, this invisible factor, the strength of national will weigh heavily on every calculation made in Tel Aviv and Washington. This single night in northern Israel transcends a local border clash. It marks a visible acceleration in the restructuring of the global order. The successful strike that neutralized 9 elite IDF units with over 450 missiles has sent ripples far beyond the Middle East, confirming that the era of unchallenged American unipolar dominance is drawing to a close. We are witnessing the practical emergence of a multipolar world. The axis linking Iran, Russia, China, and North Korea is no longer theoretical. It has demonstrated operational synergy. Iranian missiles, possibly incorporating Russian technical insights and Chinese engineering refinements, defeated American-designed defense systems protecting a key U.S. ally. This proof of concept is being absorbed in capitals worldwide. Nations that once viewed resistance to Western pressure as futile now see a viable model of asymmetric deterrence that combines indigenous technological development with strategic patience. For NATO and European allies, the implications are sobering. If Iranian ballistic missiles could saturate and penetrate sophisticated Israeli defenses, similar tactics could be employed against European air defense networks in any future high-intensity conflict. Russian planners are already integrating these lessons into their doctrines, while European capitals quietly reassess the reliability of American security guarantees when Washington hesitates to escalate directly against Iran. In the broader global south, the message is even clearer. Countries long subjected to sanctions, military interventions, or regime change pressures are drawing the conclusion that technological superiority alone does not guarantee victory. A determined state, investing wisely in missiles, drones, and electronic warfare while cultivating national resilience, can impose significant costs even on heavily armed adversaries backed by the United States. This realization is likely to influence procurement decisions, defense doctrines, and diplomatic alignments across Asia, Africa, and Latin America for years to come. China benefits most strategically from this shift. By avoiding direct involvement while positioning itself as a potential mediator, Beijing enhances its image as a responsible great power capable of offering economic partnerships where Washington offers only military aid and pressure. The weakening of American credibility in the Middle East creates space for the Belt and Road Initiative and greater Chinese influence over energy routes and regional stability frameworks. Ultimately, the rubble of IDF Northern Command and the silenced command posts of those 9 brigades represent more than a tactical defeat for Israel. They symbolize the erosion of the post-Cold War assumption that Western technological and military supremacy would remain unchallenged. The missiles launched that night did not merely target military infrastructure, they struck at the psychological foundation of American-led hegemony. The world is moving toward a system where power is more diffuse, alliances more fluid, and deterrence based on mutual vulnerability rather than one-sided dominance. What happened in northern Israel is both a symptom and a catalyst of this transformation. The old unipolar moment is fading, and a new, more complex multipolar reality is taking shape whether Washington chooses to acknowledge it or not. As the dust settles over northern Israel, one truth stands undeniable. Iran has smashed 9 elite IDF brigades with more than 450 missiles, delivering a blow that has left IDF Northern Command in ruins and Israel in a state of genuine hysteria. What we witnessed was not merely a tactical setback, but the operational confirmation of a profound strategic shift that serious analysts have been warning about for 15 years. The bill that Washington and Tel Aviv tried so hard to postpone has finally come due. This engagement has exposed the limits of layered missile defenses, the vulnerabilities of high-tech armies reliant on fragile command structures, and most importantly, the growing gap between American power on paper and its willingness to use that power when the costs become real. At the same time, it has validated the effectiveness of patient, disciplined investment by the axis of resistance and highlighted the decisive role that national will and strategic patience still play in modern warfare. The strategic map of the Middle East, and indeed the wider world, has changed. The illusion of permanent unipolar dominance is crumbling before our eyes. A new multipolar reality is emerging, one in which determined nations can successfully challenge technological superiority through asymmetric innovation, national resilience, and coordinated deterrence. The question now facing Washington is whether it possesses the self-awareness and courage to adapt to this new reality, or whether it will continue the same cycle of denial, reactive arms transfers, and managed decline that brought us to this moment. History suggests that genuine strategic reckoning rarely comes easily. 9 destroyed brigades and a panicked call for de-escalation may or may not be the shock needed to force that change. What I do know with certainty is this: the old order is fading. The next phase of this conflict and the broader global transformation is already being shaped in rooms far from public view. If this analysis has given you clarity the mainstream narrative refuses to provide, then do 3 things right now. First, hit the like button if you believe the unipolar moment is truly ending. Second, share this video with anyone who still trusts the official story coming out of Washington and Tel Aviv. Third, subscribe to Lawrence Wilkerson Daily and turn on notifications so you never miss the unfiltered strategic analysis you deserve. Drop your most serious thoughts in the comments below. Do you think America will finally recalibrate its Middle East strategy, or will it double down on the same failed approach? I read every comment. Thank you for watching. Stay sharp, stay informed, and I'll see you in the next analysis.